Well, Jennifer, first of all, congratulations
Thank you very much.
Being appointed CEO of the Business Council of Australia, and thanks for joining us on CEO Hub.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's an unusual job for a CEO. You've got an internal management task, you've got a big board of CEOs to upwardly manage, and you've got a big external task as well, sort of reporting to the world, as it were, and communicating the BCA's task to the world. So I just wonder how you're approaching in particular that external task and how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, because it's a good question. One of the great strengths of the BCA is its members. I mean, that's what it's about. And so fundamentally for me, the job is about how I facilitate the input of the CEOs and how I back them up with good research from the Secretariat, good evidence-based policy, and then the sort of behind-the-scenes working with government officials. So the way I've been doing that and the way I'll approach it is we have our CEOs on our task forces that cover a range of important policy issues, and working closely with them in those task forces to say how can we actually genuinely influence public policy, and then obviously in one-on-one relationships with them to say, you know, where do they want to actually bring their skills and interests into the public policy agenda, and then obviously working with the board to say, you know, what is the BCA's position on as a kind of collective, which is, you know, obviously it's a diverse group of people on some of these important policy issues.
So do you see yourself sort of as a facilitator of the CEOs and their policy work?
Yeah, I mean, this is very much, I think, a facilitator's role rather than you know, it's your view, it's your position. I mean, clearly you have to have a view and you have to have your own opinion on things, and you have to have a capacity to get your head around the policy issues. But this is an organisation that is about the CEOs who are its members and bringing them to the table of major policy issues and bringing their talents and huge amount of energy they've got, actually, which I'm so impressed with.
Possibly a bit daunting.
It is a bit daunting, but I go to these task force meetings, and there's yesterday, you know, some of Australia's leading chief executives talking about what should we do about funding disadvantaged schools, and you think, well, you know, this is fantastic that we've got these people who are committed and giving up huge amounts of time to a really important public policy debate in the interests of our kind of prosperity as a country.
It's often struck me that the BCA is a sort of a cross between a think tank and a lobby group. Do you kind of lean towards one or other of those things, or do you think it needs necessarily to be an equal combination of them?
Yeah, I think it's more of a kind of industry body than a lobby group, and to some extent it has to do some think tank kind of work. It has to do research, it has to produce thought pieces, it has to produce you know, papers that will be credible and influence the public debate. But it does that on behalf of its members, and in that respect it's different from a think tank, which is, you know, throwing up a whole lot of ideas. You know, our interest is what works for big business, and fundamentally that means what works for the Australian economy and how do we actually contribute to the public debate in that way. So it's a little bit of that. It's less of a lobby group, though, I think, Alan, than an industry body, which is how do we actually...
I'm not sure I understand the distinction.
Well, I always see lobby groups as, you know, in a different sort of way. Than an industry body that says...
You mean pushing a line?
Yeah, as opposed to saying, here are some options you might think about. This is what this would mean for Australia's largest businesses. This would be the economic effect of that. And being willing to sort of contemplate that there might be a range of ways of doing this. I suppose I just have a particular view about the role of lobby groups and see this more as an industry body.
Are you looking at restructuring the organisation internally?
We're having a discussion about that. I mean, this is a strong organisation. It's been pretty effective. I think the question with all these organisations is what focus you give things and how you actually concentrate on really making a difference on a few issues rather than trying to be everything. I mean, this organisation could have an opinion on every single issue in Australian public life. The better contribution, I think, is to do what my predecessor, Katie Lay, did, which is to focus the organisation on 5 or 6 or 7 key issues that you say, these are the things that are going to drive productivity, drive competitiveness, drive prosperity, and we're going to do a lot of very detailed work on those, harness the expertise of our members to that policy position, and try and influence the public debate in those areas rather than having an opinion on everything.
Yeah, this section of Business Spectator is about CEOs, and I guess you're in a unique position in a way to make an observation about what it is to be a CEO. You've only been there 5 weeks, but still. So as you look at your members and meet with them, what is it that makes a CEO stand out, do you think, from other people, ordinary people?
Yeah. To me, the CEO's role is a combination of the vision stuff and the leadership aspects and the managerial competence. So when I look at people who I say that's a highly effective chief executive, it's the person who's been able to articulate a vision for their organisation, who's been able to paint that picture really clearly to people in their organisation, but then mobilise the resources, the expertise, the skills to get things done. Because I guess vision without that managerial capability is wishful thinking, and people are often let down by that when they have these people who are kind of big ideas, people who can't execute. The really effective CEOs, I think, are the combination of people who've got the sort of leadership, visionary capability and the management competence. The other thing I think that makes a really effective CEO of the sort of organisations we're talking about is a public interest, that people have got an ethical kind of framework in which they organise their leadership, organise their management style, and they've got a set of values that they hang on to, and that they've got a public interest at the front of their mind in terms of how they actually run their organisation.
I often wonder whether a lot of CEOs have actually got that in there. Why do you think that's so important?
Because I think, certainly for the members of this organisation, if Australia's top 100 companies don't succeed, we do not succeed as a country. And I think it's absolutely essential that people aren't always looking inwards. I mean, these organisations are big. They run across huge parts of the economy, many nations across the globe. They need to have a public interest to be successful as organisations, but we also need to be thinking about the wider public interest about what makes Australia successful, what makes us prosperous as a nation. So I think, it's that combination of being successful as an organisation, but understanding what you're contributing to in terms of Australia's overall success as an economy and as a country.
I guess you need a bit of an ego to be a CEO as well, and I wonder how it goes in meetings of your members and so on, whether there's clashes of egos taking place.
I haven't observed that, and as a consultant in the KPMG in the private sector, I never observed it either. I mean, ego is a funny phenomenon, isn't it? It can be expressed in a kind of arrogant way. What I have always observed is people are incredibly courteous. They are willing to listen to different points of view, particularly in areas which are kind of outside people's normal kind of comfort zone, major public policy. They're very respectful of other people's ways of thinking about the world. But of course, people have, I think it's a healthy thing to bring your own achievements, your own competency to some of these major issues confronting our society. But I don't see that as an ego thing. I see that as these are people who've run global organisations that are incredibly successful, that have a huge contribution to make. And my observation is that they're great listeners, hungry for ideas, hugely interested in contributing to public debate, and have a pretty good sense of their own capacity to bring something to it.
Yeah, my observation is as I mingle with CEOs, they are hungry for ideas. It's a very interesting...
Yeah, absolutely.
The most curious people in some ways make the best CEOs.
Absolutely, because it's something I used to always say to young people: you cannot be successful if you do not have an inquiring mind. If you have the classic advocacy mind, where you go into each and every meeting with your own point of view locked in, and you spend all of the time fighting it out, and you don't listen to other people's points of views, and you're not willing to ask the dumb question, you will not learn, and you will be a very, very unsuccessful leader. Your
immediate previous job was with KPMG, leading their sustainability and climate change practice. So therefore you bring a fair bit of knowledge and understanding and presumably views about that subject to the role. What do you think about where Australia stands at the moment on that subject?
I think that the question that we haven't really debated properly is, I didn't meet a single business when I was a consultant that didn't think this was a huge risk management issue and that we needed to take a risk management approach. Where I think we haven't been is to say, what is the right mix of actions that we need to take that are going to keep our economy competitive, given what's actually happening in the rest of the world, that's going to keep enough capital in the system. Fundamentally, this problem gets solved by technology as well as changing consumption. So we have to leave enough money in the electricity sector particularly, and enough capital and enough investment to drive innovation, to drive change in technology. And we have to keep our trade exposed sector competitive in light of what our competitor countries are doing. And I think fundamentally we have to have something that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and makes a contribution to global reductions. I think the Commission, the Climate Change Commission report yesterday absolutely confirms that it's global action that we need, and it's a contribution to global action that we need. And we need to take that action in a way that keeps us strong as an economy and keeps enough capital in the system to drive innovation, drive investment in new technologies. Otherwise, what we're going to have is a potential kind of carbon pricing mechanism that doesn't actually solve the things that it was designed to do.
Well, in fact, it's become a matter of political combat. Do you think in your new role that you're going to be able to make a difference to the debate in Australia?
I think what my job is, and the job of the BCA, is to keep everybody focused on what's at hand here, what's at stake, what's the task. The task is we've got to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We've got to keep our economy competitive. We've got to keep capital in the system to change technology, and we've got to keep, growing our economy and growing our way of life. And we need a range of policy options to do that. And it's not a one-size-fits-all in any of this. And I think that's what we've got to do, is try and keep the debate focused on what are we actually trying to do here.
It's been great talking to you. Thanks very much for joining us,
You're very welcome. Thank you.